everyone, and welcome to the September edition of the Farmers Supply Association Agriculture Report. I'm Randy Klepechka, agronomist with Farmers Supply Association. Well, September's here. That means harvest is here, and when we taped last month, I thought we'd be a lot further along than when we are with harvest. We've had some weather issues that have really slowed things down. You know, August, when we got to July 27th, the weather turned quite a bit cooler than normal. It turned wetter than normal. We had a cooler than normal August, a wetter than normal August. A lot of cloud cover, obviously, along with that rainfall, and that really has slowed down maturity of our crops. We're taping the September program on September 5th, and we're having an approaching tropical system. Tropical system Gordon is approaching, and you can see the clouds billowing up in the background today. And the rain is supposed to be getting here tonight or tomorrow. We're supposed to get a significant rainfall event, and it's supposed to, be chances of rain for several days. So that's going to slow things down even more. So we're really just behind where we ought to be, where I thought we would be. I thought we were on the fast track, and obviously we weren't. So, hopefully that'll straighten out when we get this crop harvested. Looking at yields, again, we're so far, we haven't really got into harvest enough to really get a good trend on yields. I've heard some good rice yields. Some of the hybrids are really cutting some good yields in excess of 200 bushels. Some of the non-hybrids, cutting some average to better than, maybe a little bit better than average yields. But again, it's really not enough fields to get a good trend yet. So, again, we're just waiting to really get going full speed in this harvest, and hopefully we'll learn about some really good yields trending. But right now, it's just kind of early to tell, to be honest with you. Most of my calls over the past couple of weeks or so, late August, getting into early September, have been really on two things. One is irrigation termination, especially with soybeans and even some of the later rice. Getting a lot of calls on when we can stop watering, when we drain the rice. Also, getting some calls on harvest aids. Applying harvest aids to some of these crops to maybe speed up harvest. Last month's program, we talked about the irrigation termination. So this month, it's just perfect to talk about harvest aids. So that's what I want to do, is just talk about harvest aids and then talk about our specific crops and the harvest aids we use in them. So first, you might want to ask, what is a harvest aid? Well, harvest aid is just a material that we apply to the fields, and it really has one main goal. That's to speed up harvest, also make a more efficient harvest. So I guess you could say two goals, but they're all wrapped into one. So speed up harvest and make for a more efficient harvest. So, some farmers use a lot of harvest aids on most of their crops. Some farmers never use a harvest aid. So, it's kind of a personal opinion deal. You can use them and speed up and make your harvest more efficient, or you can not use them and do things the way you've been doing and be successful that way too. So, it's kind of a personal preference deal. What I want to do today is talk about our major crops, talk about two things: the harvest aids we have available in those crops, and second would be the timing of these harvest aids. Briefly on corn, and I don't get a lot of calls on harvest aids on corn, to be honest with you, but this year I've gotten a couple. Got one just a couple of days ago with a guy with a lot of morning glories, and they can wrap up in those corn stalks and wrap around them and be kind of a pain for harvest. So certainly a harvest aid can be very, very, very beneficial in that area. Two options for corn. One, especially if it is morning glories like this man was talking about, probably the best thing would be AIM. AIM is an outstanding morning glory herbicide, just it's death to morning glories. So that's pretty much what I recommended. You can also use sodium chlorate, which will help dry down those morning glories, just dry up the green foliage and make for harvest to be a little bit easier. But again, AIM is very good at controlling them, so I recommended AIM for that. And so if you get into those situations with corn, again, AIM for morning glories, sodium chlorate just to dry up green weeds and green vegetation out there. Next is rice, and rice is a little bit different animal because we've got another issue to kind of weave into this recommendation, and that's quality. We talk about rice, we were concerned about good milling yields, good quality. So if we use harvest aids in the wrong way, in ways not recommended, or the weather doesn't cooperate, we can really negatively affect milling yields, and that obviously affects the price you get for your crop. So we got to factor that in as well. For rice, sodium chlorate is pretty much it as far as harvest aids. Again, AIM can be used in rice if you have bad morning glory problems, but normally that's not that big a deal. most people have taken care of their morning glories earlier in the season, so we generally don't have to worry about morning glories that bad. So sodium chlorate is the material of choice. The big thing is timing of the sodium chlorate. We want our moisture to be below 25 and above 18 to apply these harvest age and rise of sodium chlorate. Some recent research has shown that on hybrids we may even want to lower that rate a little bit, lower that moisture a little bit more, and not apply the harvest age until it's about 23% moisture. You know, hybrids have really long panicles, and the moisture can vary quite a bit on that panicle, so we want to go you know, maybe a little bit lower and start about 22, 23 on hybrids, and again we want to stop by the time it gets to 18 and not do that, not apply harvest aid after that. Another big factor with the rice harvest aids is not only the timing, but the timing of harvest. You need to, usually we can start harvesting, if the weather's cooperative, start harvesting after we apply these harvest aids about 3 days after you apply them. We want to have that rice harvested within about 5 days, 7 at the max. The reason for this is that kernel, when it dries down, it's more prone to milling issues. A drier kernel just generally is probably not going to mill as well. And also if we get wetting and drying, you know, if we got rain events coming in like we do now, if you get that kernel wet, it dries again, wets again, dries again, the more time it does that, the more prone it is for cracking and lower milling yields. Also, you know, if we leave that rice out in the field too long, we can also get yield losses, mainly due to shattering. So if you're gonna use a harvest aid in rice, you need to do it right, follow the recommendations, hopefully the weather will cooperate. Finally, in soybeans, you see we're in a soybean field right now that's probably pretty close to a good timing for a harvest aid, to be honest with you. The harvest aids we have available for soybeans include paraquat or gramoxone, sodium chlorate, and sometimes we'll mix the sodium chlorate with the paraquat. That can be a good combination. Another material that's available is sharpen, and a lot of people overlook sharpen, but sharpen is an excellent broadleaf herbicide. It can dry down these broadleaf weeds, also soybeans, very quickly. And another good thing about sharpen that we may not think about, if you're gonna, like in this field here, if you're gonna no-till next year and you're not gonna work this up, sharpen has very good residual activity. So if you get the sharpen out there, it can prevent some of these winter weeds from coming up this fall and really make for a cleaner field next spring when you go to planting. So, you know, kind of a double benefit from the sharpen. Other materials available would include Roundup is also can be used as a harvest aid, a little slower obviously than some of these other things. And again, as we mentioned with other crops, AIM if you have the morning glories. So those are your options. As far as timing, we talked last month about irrigation termination with soybeans. Stage R6.5, when that soybean within the pod separates from that membrane in the pod, that means, you know, the soybean can gain no more weight. It's basically just starting to dry down at that point. Again, when that soybean within the pod separates from the membrane, that is kind of the earliest point that you can apply these harvest aids. That's a little bit on the early end sometimes, but from that point on, you're kind of getting into that safe spot of when you can apply those harvest aids and not lose any yield or any other kind of quality or anything like that. So again, harvest aids can be very beneficial. They can also be harmful if used inappropriately, so in the wrong timing and not harvested quickly enough and things like that. So, you know, be sure and give me a call if you need any more information. The MP44 has good information on it. The labels obviously have good information, but when you use a harvest aid, be sure you do it right so you don't hurt yourself. Until next month, this has been Randy Kopechka with your Farmer Supply Association Agriculture Report for September.